I came home to find a brand new HOA violation sign zip-tied to my ranch gate, right under the padlock they installed. They said it was temporary access restriction due to non-compliant perimeter aesthetics. Funny thing is, I don't live in their HOA. Funnier, I just bought the private road they all drive on. Yep, that's when things got real interesting. You want to mess with my fence? I'll mess with your foundation. Let me rewind just a bit. I live just outside the boundary of a master-planned community about 10 miles out of town. The kind with strict bylaws, pressure-washed sidewalks, and enough yard signs to stage a small political coup. My land, a 60-acre ranch, borders their neighborhood but was explicitly excluded from the HOA when the development was first built. Why? Because the road they use to access their subdivision cuts across old ranch land that developers never legally absorbed. Guess who owns that land now? That's right, me. Now, normally I keep to myself. I'm a retired civil engineer. I like my coffee strong, my property quiet, and my freedom untouched by someone named Karen with a laminated rulebook. But apparently that wasn't going to fly. It started small. First, Karen, the HOA president, sent me a notice about my excessively rustic fencing. Then it was the unauthorized gravel pile I had for a driveway repair. Then a letter demanding I submit all exterior structural updates for review. Again, I do not live in the HOA. She even had the audacity to fine me $100 for visual disruption. I framed it and hung it in my workshop. But it wasn't funny when I came back from a weekend trip and found my ranch gate chained shut. They'd used a heavy-duty padlock and zip-tied an HOA violation notice to my fence post. Access temporarily suspended, pending aesthetic review, it read. It looked official. It had their logo, Karen's signature, and even a little clip art image of a fence. But it wasn't legal. So I called the sheriff. He took one look and said, if they don't have a court order, that's criminal interference. He offered to cut the chain. I said no thanks, because I already had a better plan in motion. See, Karen had no idea I'd spent the last month finalizing a private deal with the now-defunct developer who originally built their roads. The HOA thought they owned their street outright. They didn't. The developer still held title to a small but critical easement, an L-shaped stretch of asphalt that made up the only access road to their subdivision. And that developer was happy to sell it to me for next to nothing just to get it off their books. I was officially the proud owner of 800 feet of road and a whole lot of leverage. Karen and the HOA had no idea I now owned the road they used every day. They kept pushing, fining, threatening legal action, and then they tried to hold an emergency HOA vote to permanently ban external construction vehicles, meaning they wanted to block my property access. That was the last straw. So I sent them a letter from me, the new road owner. It politely informed them that they were now tenants of a private easement. Usage fees would apply to cover maintenance and liability. And yes, their monthly dues were increasing threefold. Let's just say the next HOA meeting got very quiet. There's something magical about watching an entire HOA meeting lose its collective mind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the moment the letter landed in their hands. Some people know when they have lost. Others, they try to rewrite the scoreboard. Karen was the latter. After the HOA meltdown, the road deed reveal and her little code violation stunt got thrown out by the county, I figured she might finally call it quits. Nope, she doubled down. The next week, I got word that Karen was pushing for an emergency vote to install automatic gate arms at the community entrance. Not to keep people out, oh no. To control vehicular activity and preserve residential character. Translation, let's make it a private road that we don't actually own. Problem is they couldn't afford it. And guess who they thought should pay for part of it? Yep. Given that you utilize our easement for occasional deliveries, Karen wrote in an email, it would be appropriate for you to share in the improvement costs. She attached a proposed bill for $2,135.38, itemized down to solar-powered gate lighting. I choked on my coffee. At this point, I'd had enough of backroom antics, so I decided it was time to go public. Officially, the HOA meeting. Every quarter, the HOA hosts an open community meeting. Anyone can attend, and residents can vote on initiatives with a quorum. Thanks to my new ownership of the road, I now had adjacent stakeholder status, meaning I could request speaking time under their own bylaws. So I did. And I brought a laptop, a projector, and a manila folder full of receipts. Karen kicked things off with a speech about preserving peace, order, and property values. Then came my turn. Hi, everyone. I'm your neighbor at the ranch on the East End, the guy whose gate got padlocked by the HOA despite not being part of it. The guy you've all driven past for years without realizing. I now own the road you're on. There was a nervous chuckle, so I plugged in the projector. Slide 1, deed transfer document slide. 2, property map, highlighting the private road section. Slide 3, Karen's email, attempting to bill me for her gate plan. Then I really turned it up. Slide 4, an internal HOA email from Karen to the board labeled private, leaked by someone who had had enough. If we can delay his legal filings, we can push our road vote through first. Once the gate's in, he'll have no choice but to comply. Gasps. Slide 5. Budget breakdown showing HOA funds being earmarked for landscaping improvements, which coincidentally matched purchases at a home and garden store near Karen's house. Then came the finale. I opened a document titled Petition to Remove HOA President Due to Misuse of Authority and Misrepresentation. I had 19 signatures. I looked up and said, all we need is 5 more tonight, and the bylaws say you can vote her out right now. Silence. Then, Tanya from Lot 3 stood up. I'd like to sign, followed by George. Pam, even Mr. Hanover, who once yelled at me for having too many wind chimes. Within minutes, I had 28. Quorum, crushed. It wasn't even close. 29 votes to remove. 4 abstain, 1 vote against. Karen's husband, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Karen? She stood stiff as a board, arms crossed. This is ridiculous. You're all being manipulated. Karen, Tanya said gently, you literally tried to invoice the guy for your gate idea. Well, it would have kept things clean. It kept us broke. With Karen officially voted out, the room relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. It was like someone had opened a window and let out 3 years of stale air. I offered to waive the next month's road fee to celebrate. They applauded. Someone brought cookies. Karen walked out. The next few weeks were surprisingly quiet. The HOA board held a special session to correct budget discrepancies and reverse several emergency bylaws Karen had pushed through in the past year. One of them, a rule banning garden gnomes over 12 inches. Yes, that was real. It was repealed unanimously. Tanya stepped in as interim president. George joined the board. They opened up finances, invited community input, and stopped treating the HOA like a miniature empire. I, meanwhile, started planning improvements to the road. Real ones. Better signage, minor pothole fixes, and even a community bulletin board at the entrance. No gate, no fines, just common sense. I got a letter in the mail, certified, with a return address from a law office across town. It was from Karen. She was filing a small claim suit against me for emotional distress, harassment, and financial sabotage. She claimed I'd publicly humiliated her, damaged her community standing, and caused unquantifiable emotional trauma by turning her neighbors against her. She was asking for $5,000. My first thought? This woman really doesn't know when to quit. My second? Oh, Karen, this is going to be fun. I printed it on high-quality parchment paper just for dramatic effect, tucked it into 20 matching envelopes, and hand-delivered each one using their own community mailbox drop, of course. To the Homeowners Association of Willow Ridge Estates, effective immediately, access and usage of the private road running from Maple Crossing to Silver Creek Way shall be subject to a maintenance fee of $72.50 per household per month. I even included a cute little map with a red highlight over the section they now rented from me. Karen called me 11 minutes later. You can't do this, she snapped. Actually, I said, you can find the deed transfer recorded at the county clerk's office as of last Thursday. Feel free to look it up. It's public record. This is extortion. No, ma'am, this is infrastructure. Let me explain how we got here. See, back when Willow Ridge was being developed, the builder went bankrupt before transferring the internal roadways to the HOA. Everyone thought they owned it because, well, curbs, sidewalks, nice little street signs. But legally, it was a non-dedicated private easement. That means no city maintenance, No public ownership, just floating in paperwork limbo. Until I bought it for $8,050 plus a $12 filing fee. The best part? Nobody in the HOA bothered to check. Not Karen. Not the treasurer. Not even that one guy who thinks he's a lawyer because he watches Judge Judy. Now you might be thinking, okay, you made your point. Why triple their dues? Well, let me tell you about the dumpster incident. 3 months before they locked my gate, I'd scheduled a delivery of crushed granite for my side driveway. I got a call from the driver. He sounded annoyed. Hey man, your neighborhood lady told me I wasn't allowed to bring the truck through. What neighborhood lady? Short, red vest, clipboard, said she was community operations. That's when I checked my gate camera. Sure enough, there was Karen, arms crossed, standing in front of the delivery truck, shaking her head like she was swatting away sin. She delayed my project by 2 days, made the delivery company reroute, and then reported my gravel pile to code enforcement for being an eyesore visible from shared property lines. That eyesore, it was 350 feet away and behind a stand of pine trees. So yeah, when I sent out the new usage fee, I didn't blink at the math. $72.50 a month, 34 homes, $2,465 a month. That money, it'd go straight into road maintenance and maybe a few goats for emotional support. But I digress. The fallout was glorious. Some homeowners were confused, some were furious, and a handful, quietly impressed. My favorite response came from Pam, the soft-spoken lady on Lot 17. She showed up to the emergency HOA meeting and said, honestly, I don't mind paying more if it means Karen stops yelling at my lawn guy. But Karen wasn't done. She called a special session of the HOA board. Topic: emergency response to private road hostile acquisition. It sounded like a Pentagon briefing. Their plan? Vote to sue me for excessive fees and unlawful control of shared infrastructure. Except they couldn't even prove they owned the road in the first place. At the meeting, Karen tried to spin it as a land theft and malicious targeting. I simply stood, pulled out a copy of the deed transfer, and said, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing I stole was a filing fee and the chance to stop this from happening. That's when Mark, their former HOA treasurer, stood up. Actually, Karen, I warned you about this 2 years ago. Excuse me? Yeah, remember the budget notes? I flagged the missing road deed during the annual audit. You said it was not our concern. The room went silent. Karen's face froze. The new treasurer quietly took out her phone and started typing. The next morning, the HOA group chat, yes, they have one, exploded. Someone posted a screenshot of the deed from the county site. Someone else pulled old meeting minutes where Karen dismissed infrastructure ownership questions as paranoia. By noon, a petition to hold a vote of no confidence had 23 signatures. Karen, she went quiet for 2 days. Then she retaliated. 3 days later, I received a violation notice. Not from the HOA because, again, not a member. From the county code office claiming I had illegally modified access to a public utility corridor. I was baffled until I saw who filed the complaint. Karen Matheson. But here's the thing, I knew the county code officer. We go to the same Rotary Club, and when I called him, he sighed and said, she's filed 6 complaints in the last 2 weeks. All of them nonsense, and he closed the file. But that's when I realized this wasn't just about the road anymore. Karen was trying to save face, and that's when I decided it was time for a full-scale reveal. Let's be honest, I didn't expect Karen to file a lawsuit. Sure, she's petty, vindictive, obsessed with decorum, but I thought after being publicly removed as HOA president and outed for misusing funds, she'd take her pearls and fade into the background. Nope, Karen doesn't retreat, she rebrands. The envelope arrived certified, of course, because drama needs tracking. Plaintiff, Karen Matheson. Defendant, yours truly. Cause, emotional distress, reputational damage, and sabotage of community assets. She was suing me for $5,000 in small claims court, which is code for I couldn't win through the HOA, so I'm going to waste your time in front of a real judge. Bless her heart. Now, I've never been to small claims court before, but I've been through enough HOA meetings to know how to prep for petty warfare. So I showed up with a laptop, a binder labeled Exhibit AZ, and a flash drive I nicknamed Karen's Greatest Hits. The judge was a man in his late 60s with an expression that said, I've seen it all, and I'm unimpressed. Perfect. Karen arrived in a navy blazer, clutching a pink file folder and righteous indignation. She opened with a monologue. Your Honor, I have lived in Willow Ridge Estates for 14 years. I've served my community faithfully. This man has not only humiliated me publicly, but has turned my neighbors against me. I've suffered anxiety, sleep loss, and social exclusion. She went on for 8 solid minutes. At one point, she even said, he created an atmosphere of aggression and goat-related mockery. The judge blinked. Goat-related? Yes, Your Honor, there's a goat named Whiskey. He wears a sign that says Karen Free Zone. It's deeply offensive. My turn. I calmly stood, opened my laptop, and clicked play. First clip, Karen standing in front of my gate, padlocking it shut, slapping a fake violation notice on the fence. Next, her blocking the granite delivery truck. Then, the infamous HOA meeting where she tried to bill me for her gate installation and got voted out. The best one? A recording of her saying during a private HOA session, if we can't make him join the HOA, we'll just fine him into compliance. He'll fold. Dead silence. The judge turned to Karen. Ma'am, were you under the impression you had legal authority over the defendant's property? Well, the road passes through, a road, I cut in, that I legally own. I held up a certified copy of the deed transfer. The judge reviewed it, nodded. Ms. Matheson, your case hinges on community harm. Yet I see no legal jurisdiction, no damages supported by evidence, and ample documentation of you instigating a campaign of harassment. Karen opened her mouth to object. Case dismissed. Gavel down, and that should have been the end of it, but karma wasn't done. A local reporter, the same one who covered the HOA vote debacle, was in the courtroom that day. 2 days later, the article dropped. HOA ex-president loses small claims case after attempting to sue road owner. Karen's name trended locally. My email blew up with messages like, please tell me you're making this into a podcast. Whiskey deserves a medal. You're our hero, Road King. Even the county HOA oversight board reached out to thank me and let me know that based on my documentation, Karen was being investigated for ethical violations related to her tenure. Turns out you can't misuse HOA funds, forge fake rule votes, and lock people out of their land without consequences. Who knew? With Karen officially out of the picture, the HOA turned into a normal neighborhood. Tanya was voted in as permanent president. George got elected treasurer and immediately cut half the nonsense rules. No more garden gnome restrictions, no more mailbox matching policies, no more HOA fines for unapproved shade levels of mulch. And as for me, I paved a smooth shoulder on my road for walkers and bikes. I added signs that say, welcome. Please drive like you don't have an HOA Karen following you. The neighborhood loved it. One Saturday, Tanya stopped by with homemade cookies and said, you know, I thought you were just a stubborn landowner, but you're the reason this place feels like a community again. I shrugged. Nah, I'm just a guy with a deed and a grudge. We laughed. Whiskey headbutted her shin in approval. You'd think after a public courtroom defeat, a trending article, and a total HOA leadership collapse, Karen would just vanish. But you'd be wrong, because when people like Karen lose power, they don't disappear. They linger. Like the smell of week-old coleslaw at a potluck no one asked for. About a month after our day in court, I got a call from the County Ethics and HOA Oversight Board. Apparently, after all the press and neighbor complaints, they'd opened an investigation into Karen's time as HOA president. I was asked if I'd be willing to provide documentation. I told them, would you like that digitally, printed, or in chronological order with annotations? They chose all three. Here's what I turned over. Meeting minutes showing fabricated votes on rule changes, HOA financial records, including suspicious landscaping reimbursements, all tied to the same debit card, screenshots of residents complaining, only to mysteriously have their clubhouse access revoked the following month. And of course, the infamous padlock incident. I even included a photo of my gate post with the fake violation notice still taped to it. Below it, my caption read, this is what happens when HOA power goes unchecked. Also, duct tape doesn't hold up in Texas heat. Karen was summoned to a formal county board hearing, not criminal court, but real enough to sting. I wasn't required to attend, but the board invited me to make a statement. I kept it simple. I don't hate HOAs. I hate what happens when someone uses a set of community rules to build a personal empire. We weren't living in a neighborhood. We were living in a monarchy. Karen just forgot that the people still get to vote. The room nodded. Karen sat 2 rows behind me, arms crossed so tightly she could have popped her bracelet. A week later, the verdict came in. Karen Matheson is permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the county. She was fined $3,500 for misuse of community funds and issued a formal censure by the Oversight Board. She also had to return a HOA Community Excellence Award she'd given herself 3 years prior. Yes, that happened. With Karen fully gone and the HOA in honest hands, the neighborhood finally felt free. Tanya, now officially elected president, set about removing the Karen-era policies. No more fines for non-standard hose colors, wind chimes that made excessive tinkle front porches with unauthorized seating arrangements, i.e. lawn chairs. They even took down the compliant garden layout diagram that had been posted near the clubhouse. Turns out no one wanted to live in a botanical dictatorship. As for me, I finally got to work on something I'd been putting off for years. A community greenhouse right near the edge of my property. It wasn't just for me, we built it together. Volunteers from both sides of the HOA fence. Some grew tomatoes, some grew herbs. One guy just came to talk about chili recipes and complain about the Dallas Cowboys. It was perfect. And then someone had a brilliant idea. To celebrate the new era of Willow Ridge, Tanya suggested we host a small fall festival. Burgers, music, hay bales. And as a joke, someone said, we should have a goat lead the parade, you know, the goat. That's how Whiskey the Goat ended up being the guest of honor at the first ever Karen-free Fall Fest. He wore a little sash that read, Official Road Compliance Officer. Kids fed him carrots. Adults took selfies. Karen's old house, still listed. Price dropped again. One afternoon I got a letter, no return address, inside a folded HOA violation slip. It read, your decorative rocks are not HOA approved and may present a visual safety concern. It was unsigned, but in the corner in tiny cursive it said, enjoy your little victory. I taped it to my fridge. Under it, I wrote in Sharpie, I didn't win a little, I bought the road. This whole saga started because someone thought rules were power. But rules without fairness are just control mechanisms for insecure people with too much time on their hands. HOAs can be good. They can build real community if led with humility and common sense. But the second someone treats a rule book like a sword instead of a safety net, you either push back or get sliced up like yesterday's zoning plan. I didn't plan to become a local legend. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what? I think I'll buy a road just to prove a point. But when someone locks your gate, finds your fence, insults your goat, and dares to make your freedom feel like a negotiation, you've got 2 options. Lay low or dig deep, get legal, and take back your driveway. I chose the second one, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about drawing a line, literally in the dirt, and saying, this is mine. You don't get to rewrite the rules just because you printed them in color ink. Let's be clear, HOAs aren't the enemy, but unchecked authority is. When a neighborhood turns into a monarchy, with a Karen on the throne and a clipboard as her sword, that's when ordinary people have to push back. Not with yelling, not with pitchforks, with documents, deeds, footage, facts. Because nothing scares a fake HOA tyrant more than someone who knows the law better than they do. So here's what I learned. Know your rights, know your land. Don't assume someone has power just because they say they do. And always keep copies of everything, especially when duct tape and HOA logos get involved. Oh, and one more thing. Never underestimate the power of a goat named Whiskey. He didn't just eat weeds, he ate fear. He turned HOA letters into chew toys. He showed the whole neighborhood what freedom smells like. It's not great, but it's honest. And now it's your turn. Have you ever tangled with a Karen? Was it a real HOA nightmare? Or a power-hungry neighbor who thought she was the law? What would you have done differently? What advice do you have for dealing with overreaching HOAs? Or do you secretly love your HOA? We won't judge, but we'll definitely ask follow-up questions. Drop your stories, rants, and advice in the comments. We're building something better than an HOA down there. A community that laughs together, vents together, and maybe builds a fence together. If you've made it this far, thank you. You turned a petty war over gravel and goats into a community of 400,000 plus people who now know you don't have to be rich, loud, or powerful to stand your ground. You just have to be right and willing to show up with receipts. New story coming next week involving a neighbor, a leaf blower, and one very creative use of Christmas lights. Don't miss it. Like, subscribe, and comment below. Because the road to justice, sometimes you have to buy it first.